Hi everyone, welcome back. Week 11, lecture 4. Now, this is a final video for week 11, and let us now look into advantages and disadvantages of globalization. Some people, some organizations, some governments aren't really happy with the concept of globalization, while they're actually thriving with the benefits of globalization. Now you need to decide for yourself, is globalization good or bad thing? Let us have a look at the advantages and disadvantages of globalization. Let us now have a look at the advantages of globalization. One of the first one is there are free trades that comes with the concept of globalization among countries, or even like a trade blocks in a bigger sense when more countries express willingness to sign a free trade agreement. What that leads to? It creates more jobs, and of course, with more jobs, creates more spending power, increases the spending power of the population in that particular country, and of course, better standard of living. People are in favor of what's happening, and the concept of globalization is beneficial. Also, on the other hand, with that additional income and better standard of living, more products are available domestically and internationally from the countries that are free trade partners now. With that comes the cash flow, so liquidity of capital domestically and internationally. Organization banks will move across the border, bringing the financial resources needed for the organization to explore the opportunities that exist with the concept of globalization. Now, on the other hand, also, it gives a flexibility due to the fact that there are free trade agreements among nations. There are no borders. Oh, there are borders, but they are fictional in many ways. There is a free movement of goods and services. In the European Union, for example, there are no borders as per se in the sense of movement of goods and workforce, but itself generates benefits for the local domestic country as well as for the ones part of the free trade agreement. There is also increase of communication, exchange of ideas that contributes to the concept of research and development. Now also organizations are finding easy to obtain the necessary information needed for them to become a part of that trade agreement, or really be a major player in the global market, global citizen. As we mentioned in the previous slide, there is, of course, increase in spread of transportation of goods and services. So due to removal of different form of barriers, customs, and so forth, organizations are finding easier to ship the goods from nation to nation. And of course, nations are themselves able to source the material and services that are needed for their domestic production. Now, we know with this particular concept, we are literally starting to live in what is often referred to a global village. That are without any barriers, we seem to become a lot more closer to each other, and we're finding that these barriers are just restricting the movement of ideas. And then really when you're looking at the bigger picture, it seems to lie. It seems to be living like 8 billion people living in one global village that's sharing a similar type of interest in the concept of prosperity and success. Now, at the same time, it does indicate indirectly that there is increasing interdependence among nations. So any form of disruption in that particular case will have a rippling effect on those economies. We've seen recently a trade war between China and the United States having a small role to play in regards to a level of economic integration globally and how itself negatively affects it. So we've seen that all of these advantages that are being listed over the last few slides, if they are in any way altered or moved or adjusted, it will have a negative impact on that concept of globalization. That was one side of the argument. Now let's have a look at the other side, disadvantages. One of those disadvantages is that basically globalization leads to development of the materialistic lifestyle. Consumer needs and wants will be shifted. predominantly to those high-end products, the products that require a lot more financial commitment in order to purchase them. And that itself leads to some form of creation of wealth. It might be actually a negative thing in the sense that we lose the understanding of why do we live, what are our roles on this earth. Now, on the other side, World Trade Organization as a governing body of some form of globalization can be very intrusive, pushing their own ideas, and those ideas could be in certain situation without consent of the nation that is in dispute. World Trade Organization will simply say, if you are in the global market, if you are a global citizen, these are the rules, regulation that we have in place in the concept of joining the global village, and therefore they will in certain situations push their own agenda across. We mentioned when we in the previous video, political globalization. That is the perfect example of that aspect of political globalization. Also, the other disadvantages is basically in decrease in environmental integrity. Weak regulation of a particular country can have an effect on that nation as well as all the other nations that are part of, for example, a free trade agreement with that particular country. Now, what does it mean? It means that it will put a pressure on the government of that nation to implement stronger policies that will drive and protect the environmentally sensitive industries, environmentally sensitive area of that nation that might be subject to global enterprises and global players. The other disadvantage is increase of likelihood of economic disruption in one nation affecting all the other nations that are trading partners of the same one. Now, what does it mean? Basically, when those, to the concept of globalization, when those countries form a free trade agreement on some way, that new way of doing a business in a developed country might actually form or serve as some form of disruption in a host country. And itself, when we mentioned disruption in week 3, we did mention that disruption commonly leads to loss of jobs, insecurity, decrease in unemployment of that nation for the significant period of time. So that taken into consideration, we can see now that the concept of globalization can have that immediate impact on the nations that are joining a global village. The last two disadvantages of globalizations are increase in the flow of skilled and non-skilled workers. We know that for the fact that through the concept of globalization, workforce will move into the countries that are offering better working conditions, more prosperity for them to grow as individual in the field of the interest, but also giving them a better lifestyle and more opportunities to succeed in life. Now, that itself is being very evident through concept of globalization, where these global players outsource the workforce from those nations that are offering those skills needed for the organization to succeed. A perfect example of that would be, for example, in Eastern Europe, countries such as Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia. The workforce from those countries, predominantly in the medical science, like a doctor, nurses, and so forth, are moving to the countries that are members of the European Union, predominantly like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and giving them opportunity to have that better lifestyle. That itself brings the shortage of those workers in those countries. So nevertheless, we've seen through the concept of increased flow of the workforce, some countries will be benefiting from that concept, but a lot of countries will actually have a negative impact. Probably the last one is basically the corporate influence on the political parties may play important role in a lot of people and governments actually don't liking the concept of globalization. Money greedy organizations are affecting the way the organization works and the government for that matter. So in week 2, we were talking about the concept of ethics and how ethics play important part in the government, organizations, and business environment. And now this is a perfect example of what leads to those ethical concerns. Big organizations, big conglomerates will pretty much do everything in their power in order to achieve their goals, have the access to those cheap raw materials, and itself, it will devastate the local economy. With that, guys, I leave you alone. Take care, stay safe.